if we just look at cost of production, so this is what the variable costs plus the overhead costs. So we do it on a cash basis, which I guess people can relate to pretty much. So that's the cash cost of production. So it's $7 a kilo milk solids. $7.39 for North.
Kerry, if people want to convert from milk solids to cents per litre, roughly just divide the number by 14, and that'll get you a...
Yeah. But it's equally good to get your brain attuned to talking in kilo milk solids too, because that's what you get paid for, paid on, basically. So, yeah, a bit of a difference between North and South. There always is. Part of that is scale, part of it is different systems, cooler weather, higher per cow production.
Excuse me, Kerry, that top 25%, that's not that's just the average of the top 25%. So they're getting less, or their costs of production are less.
Yes, that's right.
So the average.
Yeah, so that's 8 farms across the whole sample. So it's
previous slide, they're also getting less income.
Yep.
Small farms.
No, not smaller farms. More, they've got generally better cost control, and they're a mix. There's about 4 from the north and 4 from the south this year, so it is a mixture. So that's a blend. That's the average milk income, if you like, Ewan. So some of them would be higher and some of them would be lower.
But their EBIT was
$1.58.
Yeah.
Yep.
Lower.
So their milk income wasn't necessarily higher. So their extra profits is more driven by lower cost than it is by higher income. And I think that's the significant point.
On the low stocking rates, they can have a higher proportion of homegrown food.
Yeah.
And that reflects a lot on the land value as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case this year, looking at the farms that are in it, in the top 25, but they're all probably had better pasture, grown more pasture this year, or had more homegrown feed in the diet. And, you know, that's partly good management as well as partly, you know, what you do with the water that you get. But we work through, so this line here is the cost of production with those imputed things like imputed labour and depreciation. So you can see that we go from cash to adding in those imputed costs. So they add on another $1.30 odd to the cost of production. Then we make adjustments for inventory changes, and then we have a true cost of production after adjusting for inventory changes. So you can, that comes to about $8.35, which on a cents per litre basis, someone will work that out. Sheena, $8.35. And yeah, the north was higher than the south, but again, the top 25 were lower on the cost department. So, you know, I think that's part of the feature of the more profitable farms tend to be able to control their costs for various reasons, whether they've got better labour efficiency, better facilities, perhaps better infrastructure, you know, bigger dairies, potentially push more cows through better irrigation systems. So infrastructure plays a part, but I think management skills play a big part as well in what allows them to keep their cost of production lower. Just to focus on those feed costs, and I've got the cents per litre here so you don't have to convert, but yeah, homegrown feed, just those costs you pulled out, Josh, 33 cents for all our feed costs this year. So, you know, that takes a big chunk of your milk income straight off. And there wasn't a lot of difference between north and south this year. So, yeah, as I say, the highest feed costs we've ever had in the history of our sample. So no wonder our profits are down.
So how much feed were they growing per hectare? You know, like
the north.
Was there much difference in farms?
North actually went up a bit this year as a group in terms of pasture consumption. They actually 8.5, bit over 8.5 tonne. South dropped off to 7.5 tonne or thereabouts on average. So normally we sit around about that 8 across all our samples. So in actual fact, yeah, North farmers did harvest more feed this year, and some farmers actually did pretty well on a per hectare basis in dry matter production. I think maybe tend to focus all your efforts on the fewer hectares, and that allows you to maybe grow more per hectare. Again, the range is really huge. So this is the farms in the north, 17 of them on EBIT, and that red line is the average EBIT of all the farms. So, but you can see there's a lot of variation up and above and below the line in our farms. So one farm in the north cracked the $1.50 of EBIT, but we had a few that were over $1, but quite a few that were between that sort of 0, 50 cents, and then a few farms with a negative EBIT. Negative EBIT doesn't necessarily mean they're going out of business. It just means, as Neil said, when you take into consideration those imputed costs, they didn't make a profit. They might have survived cash flow wise, and we don't count off-farm income, for example, or other sources of income that might have been coming in, and this doesn't take into account extra borrowings, etc., that might have happened. So, but as you can see, there's a big range.
In terms of irrigation, can you point out if some of those were irrigated or not irrigated?
Not off the top of my head. 27 certainly is irrigated, and 25 from memory. 31 not. 35 not, actually. So,
Kerry, have you run a correlation between actual dollar per kilo exports and pricing to see what influence that has on some of those farms? Because I know in the data set there are a couple that are on high prices.
yep. Yeah, I haven't done that correlation. We've got a correlation between cost of production and return on asset, but not on milk price at this point. But yes, obviously milk price makes a difference, but we find every year it's not the highest milk price farms that are the highest profit farms necessarily. So sometimes a high milk price has a high cost of production, so the margin's still quite small. So the farms with the biggest margin don't always have the highest milk price, but they certainly have a better control of their costs.
Without divulging any individual details, does the project include like niche markets such as like organic farms or A2 farms that might skew the data, or are they excluded from it?
We don't have any organic farms. I think, yeah, we do have a couple of A2 farms. Yeah, but we try and, I guess, the filter that I put over what farms come in, and we've had 7 go out and 7 come in this year, so we always get a bit of a turnover of farms, Catherine. So the main filters I put over them are, do they have good data? That's the number one criteria for being part of it, and generally, are they keen on being involved, and are they happy to have their project, their farm data in the public arena, I guess, even though it's in aggregated form, but you can get individual figures per farm. So, and just to fit regionally wise, so that I've got a balance across the state. So, yeah, I will look at anybody, but if they're a particular outlier, you always think, are they going to skew the data? But with 32 farms, I think we've got a big enough sample size that we can have a range of, I guess, sizes and farm systems without skewing the data, but too small to be able to really kind of boutique-wise the dairy too much, the information too much. So, but I don't have any organic farms in it in response to that. Sorry, Rod. Nice, Steve.
Those later numbers, so some of those may be only first entrants.
Beg pardon?
Some of those higher numbers, like down the bottom, 35, 33, or whatever it is,
Yep.
may be first year entrants.
Yes. Yep. So I just give a new number each year. So the farms keep their number every year, so they're always the same number. So yeah, as you can see, we've got a few probably originals that have been in it for the whole 8 years. But yeah, getting up this end, there'll be some new farms.
So a lot of that could come down to the data given to you too.
Yeah. To be honest, it does take a couple of years to get the data really right, to make it all line up, and to make sure that the farmers are in the right wavelength of what we want, because we do have to adjust at either end of the year so that we get the expenses that were incurred in that year. So it's different to a cash flow if you're keeping cash books, for example. So there's a bit of tweaking. So yeah, it does take a little bit to get the farms right. So
just looking at that, some of the entrants that have been here for quite a while are a lot lower than the new entrants.
not quite sure.
For a long time, calls us like before. That's how we can use data.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I don't know about that. Well, we keep getting people joining, so I think that's a positive. So,
What happened between number 9 and 20? There's must be a couple of years, they all just jumped.
yeah, we had some farmers have only been in it for 1 year and then dropped out for various reasons, either left the industry or didn't want to do it or thought it was too much work to get the data together. So, yeah, so there's been 35 and 32 farms over the 8 years. So what's that? Over 60 farms have been through it over the 8 years, which is interesting. Again, south, a big range again. Some really did it tough, but we had a couple that were over the $2 a kilo milk solids in the south.
On that one, are you able to, without saying too much, like say whether those lower ones are more inland type ones? Or?
Yes, these three are all inland. Yep, in that water market, you know, doing it really tough. So, you know, outsourcing a lot of their feed. These ones are this one, and these couple are South Coast Illawarra region, and they've done very well, considering, yeah, good milk price, they would say, and you know, didn't have to rely too much on brought in hay and fodder.
There's been some local attributes to securing fodder in the line that they issue to.
Yeah, the Manildra being close to that. Yeah, yep. You know, and some farmers down there said they had the best summer for growing maize, and they, you know, maize silages were really, you know, they got really good yields and good quality. So, you know, it's a diverse industry that we're in, which is a good thing. You know, it's good that in terms of risk management for processors particularly, that, you know, not everyone's doing it really tough at the same time, although currently I think everyone's doing it pretty tough. I don't know, what's it like down the south coast at the moment?
Biggest desert. Big farms carting water. Cattle starting. Illawarra, yeah, it's got crop out of the field, no grass growth at the moment. But it's on the last rotation.
So
Inventories and some of those, you know, we're starting to get
on a bit of a knife edge.
stock and I guess that's one of the huge costs we talk about that.
Yeah.
So next year will be even more interesting because we're actually 6 months past this.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
you can
right.
actually do
Yeah.
too.
And if we get no water next year, how many people are just going to pull the pin? Because I'm going to buy it bloody people.
Yeah, look, and water's the real crunch at the moment. Like, I mean, you know, you just can't cart water for dairy cattle. It's not feasible. So, you know, if you can't find another water source, that's probably going to be the trigger that, unfortunately, sees more people exit. But so just those. We had 9 farms did over that $1 a kilo. We only had about 5 do over $1.50. 8 of the 9 were coastal, and 1 was inland that had irrigation and had virtually a full allocation between river water and groundwater. Yeah, but there was a range of farms, but probably 5 of those were between that 2 and 3 million litre mark, so 300 to 400 cows, I guess, or 250 to 350 cows, 400 cows. Oh, there we go. Of the whole 8.
How much milk they're producing, so income's got to be up and less labour. They can soon put one labour off and increase profit, you know.
Yeah, that's true, but you can also be out of whack with a big farm too, and you know, be employing a lot of labour and not making a lot of profit, or be more vulnerable to that feed market if you've got a lot more mouths to feed. So, yeah, economies of scale work to a point, but it's not necessarily the bigger farms that are profitable, and that's borne out every year. Yeah, those guys average 65% of milk from homegrown feed, where the state average was 60, so a bit more homegrown feed in the diet. Their feed costs were quite a bit lower than the general pack, and their labour efficiency was a bit higher as well, but not necessarily the highest. So, you know, the labour efficiency but the lower feed costs and lower cost of production were the kick. I'll just quickly do the regional differences. So there's if I do that cut again, so our 8 North Coast farms, milk price $8.80, gross farm income $9.30, cash costs $7.30, total costs $8.50, EBIT of $71, which is higher than what it was last year. So those guys have sort of fared a bit better than they did last year. If we come down to this region, so there's 8 farms in the Hunter, Gloucester, sort of Manning, but the Manning's, Manning. So this split's about Wauchope. So a bit lower milk price, a bit lower gross farm income. Well, $1 lower milk price. Farm working expenses were higher than the North Coast guys. Cost of production $8.80. So the EBIT in this area is pretty low at 13 cents. And just a little squeak of a return on asset.
Broke the north up again to show
You can even break that north
Yeah.
top
Go
again
again.
from mid coast to north coast. Because north coast had decent season.
Yeah, well, round here had a half decent season. These guys have had a pretty bloody tough season up there, I'll tell you. Those real North Coast ones.
By Norco, they looked after their farmers.
Well, they've had a probably,
You've got to remember it's up until June.
yeah.
To not July there. June, March.
So, you know, more competition for milk up there, milk price is higher. So that kind of gives you a bit of a different sort of take on what it is. So, you know, obviously this area's done it really tough. If we look at the south, if we split up South Coast, they're probably a success story in terms of profit this year, or, you know, in our sample, but this includes Bega, and, you know, Bega had a reasonable sort of season, but
$1 a kilo separates that data set to the milk price at least. So if you go everything in that Bega zone, they're operating at around $7 a kilo. Whereas you come up into the Warra Shoal Hay, you're at $8 plus.
yeah.
So there's actually a big split in that data.
But that's 7 farms, so I don't want to split that any further because you kind of get to skewing the data a bit then. But but you know, the cost of production is interesting. It's probably the lowest cost of production of the 4 regions this year for reasons we've talked about. So yeah, they've scraped in over the $1 EBIT, but, you know, not what you would call hugely profitable. And our inland regions, so they're those kind of inland valleys for Forbes, Cowra, Wagga, and then down in the Murray. They've always have the lowest milk price. They've got the southern zone milk price. They always have lowest costs, but this year their costs have gone up quite considerably to what they usually are. And so they've got a negative EBIT this year for the first time. So, you know, unfortunately we're seeing farm exits down there, you know, with the water situation the way it is, and it's not surprising to see, you know, the reverse in fortunes when you can't grow feed and you have to buy in a lot of feed and buy your water. And just lastly, I'll show you the top 25. So this is those 8 farms if we lump them together. Not the highest milk price, but still probably higher than the state average. Farm working expenses are the standout, and cost of production. So a lower cost of production, although not as low as those South Coast farms. But their EBIT of that $1.58. So I guess it shows that, you know, some people did make a profit even in a, you know, really crap year, production-wise. But yeah, even our top farmers, you know, $1.58. So we're not talking huge profits by any means. A little bit of farmer expectation, and again, this was asked 3 months ago, do you think the milk price will increase? And everybody was pretty sure at that point that the milk price was going to increase. But more importantly, would you increase milk production? The brown is the North farmers, and probably about 50% of them were thinking yes, they would, and that was at the time when we thought we might get a reasonable spring. But a lot of the South farmers were still pretty cautious, so they were either going to remain stable or you know, some were even saying they might decrease milk production. But that's, again, when we asked the question 3 months ago. Milk production's continuing downwards. Milk price is up, and there's strong competition for milk, as we've seen, and a bit of a movement between processors. But yeah, I don't need to tell you that it stayed very dry. So, and you know, these thunderstorms are around, but they're very intermittent, and just got to be under the right one. But the general long-term forecasts for rain aren't showing much until January, I think, before we get some sort of a break. So hopefully you'll get under a thunderstorm. Grain harvest is not looking good in New South Wales and Queensland, so but Neil will talk more about this, no doubt, but there's not any relief in grain costs on the horizon. Cattle prices are pretty good if you've got good conditioned cows and you can get them into the abattoir, but at times it's been lower for culls. Temporary water prices are just prohibitive in the southern Riverina zone. But I guess we're lucky here, as Scott said, that we've still got a water allocation through summer, whereas a lot of systems don't. But then we've just recently had the bushfires and the water supplies at kind of crisis levels, so not a optimistic picture.